Well, throughout the course of this week, we've been telling you a lot about Aaron Swartz, an internet activist and regular guest on RT America, who was found dead in his home on Friday after an apparent suicide. Aaron's family is blaming the government and its vast overreach for pursuing a harsh 30-plus year sentence for Aaron, who is accused of illegally downloading academic articles without permission. No victims, just information made public, and he faced 13 felony counts of hacking and wire fraud under the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act. Well, now, a U.S. Congresswoman from California has drafted a bill to try to update the law and prevent what she calls a dangerous legal interpretation. Representative Zoe Lundgren wrote in an internet chat on Reddit yesterday, a site that Swartz himself helped create, that we should prevent what happened to Aaron from happening to other internet users. The government was able to bring such disproportionate charges against Aaron because of the broad scope of the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act and the wire fraud statute. Now, she's calling it Aaron's Law, and I want to talk more about it with Trevor Tim, an activist with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Hey there, Trevor. Relatively speaking, this is new territory. So let's first talk about hacking laws overall. Many people see them as far too vague and therefore much easier, to sort of interpret however the prosecutor wants to.
Right, exactly. There's a few problems with it. The main law is called the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, and unfortunately it was written much more than a decade ago, before we really had an idea about our conceptions of hacking and computer crime and all of that as we do today. And so it can be used in these really harsh ways, where, as we saw in the Aaron Swartz case, he was facing 35 years in prison for essentially going into JSTOR and downloading a bunch of academic documents. Now you can compare it to essentially checking out too many books in the library, and he was facing decades in prison for this so-called crime. Now the problem is that they define words like unauthorized access to mean just about anything, and the Department of Justice has taken a bunch of cases to court saying that if you violate the terms of service on various websites, that you may actually be breaking the law, and that should never be the case. These laws needed to be updated, and then the prison sentences needed to be relaxed, especially for supposed crimes like this, where there was no economic motive, or there was no way for him to profit, even if they said, even if he did all the things that that they said he did.
And something that a lot of people forget, in Aaron's case at least, is that JSTOR, this place where he illegally downloaded all this stuff, didn't have a problem with it. When all was said and done, JSTOR said, they were fine with it. So it's really interesting when you look at this case, but also looking at cases ahead and trying to sort of lay the groundwork for future cases. So Congresswoman Lofgren's bill includes a provision to, quote, amend Title 18 United States Code to exclude certain violations of agreements or contractual obligations relating to internet service from the purview of certain criminal prohibitions and for other purposes. Trevor, kind of break this down for me. I mean, could updating this law really make a noticeable difference in the fight for a free and open internet?
Oh, absolutely. And I think the bill is going to change a little bit and expand as they go forward with it. But that problem addresses what I had mentioned before about the terms of service agreement, where whenever you go on a website or you sign up for a service like Twitter or Facebook or Google or JSTOR, for example, you sign an agreement to abide by certain rules that they set out. But because you enter into a contractual obligation with another company does not mean that you're breaking computer crime laws or hacking laws if you then allegedly violate that agreement. So that would solve one part of the problem, but there are many others, especially when you're talking about the definitions of language in the bill and also the prison sentences. We have seen the prosecutors in this case really target him very aggressively, far more aggressively than similar actions that you would see in the physical world. So, if we're taking the allegations in this complaint as true, even though they may not have been, then, Aaron was engaged in some sort of civil disobedience and protest, and the maximum he should have gotten was, something akin to trespassing, like 30 days in jail, like you do if you are involved in a sit-in or some other sort of protest. But instead, because he committed his alleged crime with a computer, he was facing 35 years, and that's just not fair.
Yeah, certainly a lot of people who have really been following this case closely really felt like the prosecutors, the Attorney General's office wanted to make an example out of Aaron Swartz and sort of say, you know, this is what's going to happen, this is the precedent, and that's the problem here with so many of these internet cases is there isn't precedent so far. I want to get your take, though, Trevor. I mean, what else needs to be done with this specific act, the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act? What else needs to change in it before you know, people can feel comfortable about the future of internet freedom?
Well, unfortunately, I think there needs to be kind of a not necessarily looking at specifics in the law, but looking at information that the general public gets about so-called hackers and you know, how we approach them in society. You know, right now in Congress, there's going to be, coming up, there's going to be a big cybersecurity debate again, and we're going to, you know, hear all of this scaremongering about cybercrime and cyber Armageddon and everything. Yet, you know, here we see on this other side, you know, hackers can do a lot of good. Aaron was a great activist that fought against SOPA. He created the original RSS. He helped with Creative Commons. And, you know, it's a completely different type of hacker than you hear the government trying to scaremonger about. And so, you know, the first problem is educating Congress that there are a lot of people that are doing a lot of good that are trying to, you know, to further society with their so-called crimes, and that we need to completely separate that from real cybercrime and, you know, potential, you know, cyber Armageddons or whatever they want to say.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, I mean, certainly we had Aaron on RT America quite a bit to talk about SOPA, the Stop Online Piracy Act, and PIPA, the Protect IP Act. And those did not end up passing. And people like Aaron, people with outspoken voices, were able to get sort of those messages out in terms of why this would not be good for society. We're about to have an inauguration here on Monday, a second term for President Obama, a similar looking Congress. What are you kind of focused on, Trevor, with the Electronic Frontier Foundation in terms of sort of the next pieces of legislation to deal with cybersecurity?
Well, it's not just cybersecurity, it's internet privacy in general. In the next year, there may be more privacy battles in Congress than there have been in the past decade. You know, we have this, they tried to pass the cybersecurity bill CISPA last year, which basically carved a giant loophole into all of our privacy laws that allowed companies to give information and potentially your communications to the government without a warrant. Thankfully, it didn't pass, but they're going to try to bring it up again. You know, email still isn't protected with a warrant like physical letters and phone calls is, even though, you know, it's our main form of communication. There's GPS tracking on our cell phones that Congress has to take a look at because police haven't been using a warrant for that. There's drone surveillance, and even the administration wants to pass a new internet surveillance law, which would basically force companies to install a backdoor into their networks, so Facebook and Gmail and everything else, that they would have real-time access to it. Now, they would still need a warrant for this, but this would still obviously bring up huge cases for abuse, and also would just make the internet less safe. So those are all the battles that we see coming in the next year, and it's really sad that we don't have someone as great as Aaron to sit here and to stand with us and fight against them.
Yeah, certainly Aaron helped us a lot to understand what was happening, to break this down, and to put into perspective why it was important for every American to care about these issues. Appreciate having you on the show, Trevor Timm, an activist with the Electronic Frontier Foundation. Thanks so much.
Thanks a lot.